Hello and welcome to Entirely English, the online English school and the YouTube channel that aims to help people understand the peculiarities of the British. Today, we are going to be looking at wakes in more detail. In the previous video, we sort of touched upon them. In this one, we'll look in more detail and then focus more precisely on the Irish wake, which is a little different from most people's. Before we begin that, I want to give a shout out and congratulations to Dimitri, my student. Congratulations, Dimitri. Getting a 9 in the IELTS is wonderful. You did a lot of work, and I'm very, very proud of you. Enjoy your time in Australia. Okay, so on to our subject, the wake. Now, traditionally, the wake was a time when people would sit with the body until the time of the funeral. They would sit, and in the Christian tradition, they would pray. It's called a prayer vigil. The idea being, in one respect, to guarantee the body was not possessed by a demon or devil. And the other side was to assure themselves that the person was actually dead, because there were so many stories of people being buried alive. Apparently, this is where the idea of the stake through the heart in the vampire stories came from. Oftentimes, when they came to bury the person, they would put not a wooden stake, but like a metal needle through the person's heart, because it was thought better that they were definitely dead than they woke up underground and suffered. So anyway, the wake. This would happen for 3, maybe 4 days before the actual funeral. And this gave time for people from distant parts to come and pay their respects. The body might be placed in the deceased bed, in which case the family would dress the bed, make it up with fresh linens, sheets, etc., wash the body, and traditionally they would dress it in a robe like the Franciscan monks wear, because this was supposed to be the clothes they would wear in heaven. It's only later, in the sort of last 100 years, that we started dressing people in their Sunday best. Sunday best is a phrase that means the best clothes you have, the ones you would wear to church on a Sunday. So that place the body in the bed, and people would come and pray and say goodbye, wish it farewell. And in all of these homes, because they knew people were coming, would be visiting, lots of people from all over, for those days before they arrived, the family, the widow, etc., would spend a lot of time cleaning, making the house pristine. This served 2 purposes. Firstly, it avoided shame and embarrassment. You don't want your neighbors knowing that you've got a dirty house. And secondly, it distracted the bereaved. It helped them take their minds off their loss and focus it on the cleaning and the urgency of getting everything ready. So the wake is kind of the antithesis of a wedding ceremony. The wedding ceremony, you have the ceremony, and then everybody goes and celebrates the wedding of these people. In funeral tradition, the wake came first because it was this time waiting to make sure the body was dead. And then you'd have the burial. Oftentimes, people after the burial would still go back to the home and have a few drinks and chat with the bereaved family to support them, to help them overcome their grief. Of course, at some point you have to leave, and they're left with their memories and their sadness. So that's it. The wake, sitting with the body, making sure it's dead, praying for it, making sure it's going to go to heaven, and then the funeral. Then we get the difference with the Irish wake. And you probably heard all sorts of stories, all sorts of outlandish tales, often exaggerated. So there are a lot of different stories you'll find on the internet about these customs. Seems many of them say that the body was in the main room under the table. This is not my experience of a wake. In a wake, the deceased was given the pride of place. So the table in the middle of the room, the coffin with the body in it, the lid off, would be in the center of the room, the coffin on the table. So food and things would not be on the table. They'd be on sideboards. They'd be brought in from the kitchen on trays. And alcohol, of course. Now, funerals, like weddings, can be expensive things. Not the funeral so much itself in the Irish Catholic tradition. The grave and the service by the priest were provided free. But things like the cars, the flowers, all of the food. So, similar to what I've seen in Korean dramas, Irish tradition would have people giving a death offering. So an envelope with money in it for the bereaved. This helped offset some of the expense. And hopefully there was enough to help them through the times after the death. But food and drink were very important. Some of these people coming to the funeral had traveled a long way, and they needed to be fed and watered, as we would say. There's a thing in Ireland that you do not only go to the funerals of your family and friends. You go to the funerals of your friends' families. So it's kind of a chain. Because you think about it, you want a lot of people to come to your funeral as well. So friends of friends and families of families would come from miles around to the deceased's home to reminisce, to share memories, to think about the person, to wish them well on their journey. And that's what would happen at the wake. People would stand around, they'd joke, they'd remember fun times with the deceased, they'd tell stories. Maybe some people who have lived miles away on the other side of Ireland have come and they know stories that even the bereaved family don't know, maybe from when they were at school and things. So they'd share these memories, share the joy of this person's life while drinking and eating. And because of this exponential expansion of people coming to the funeral, people who know people who know people who were related to the deceased, hundreds and hundreds of people would come to the funeral. So they wouldn't all be inside the house. The wake would spill out into the gardens and maybe extend down to the pub as well. And people would cycle through the house to spend some time with the deceased, to wish him well. And obviously, many of these people would stay for the funeral itself, which meant at the end of the funeral, there was a massive queue of people waiting to shake hands and wish the bereaved well. And it became a thing in Ireland. If there was 2 or more funerals scheduled for the same day, there would be a kind of race to get to the church first. And, first come, first served. So if you saw another funeral procession going down the road, you'd speed up. You want to get there. In fact, there's a nice little sketch by Dave Allen, which I'll see if I can find and put in. So it should happen now, unless YouTube copyright cut it out.
Only one person who is buried in a graveyard can go to heaven. Which basically means if 2 people are buried in the same graveyard on the same day, the last one in has got to wait till tomorrow. So can you imagine what would happen if one funeral met another funeral going to the same graveyard?
But back to the wake itself. One of the traditions that goes back hundreds of years is the clay pipe. You've seen in the old cowboy and Indian films where the Indians and Native Americans, as we must call them now, would have the pipe of peace and they'd suck it and pass it round. It was a similar thing in Ireland. Everybody would suck on this clay pipe, an old clay pipe, take a puff, pass it to the next person. And each time you inhaled the smoke, when you exhale, you would wish, Lord, have mercy on their soul. Even non-smokers were fully expected to participate in this. So this clay pipe would go round hundreds of people, constantly being refilled with tobacco, constantly. May the Lord have mercy on his soul, all around, these prayers going up to heaven. And then after the funeral, the clay pipe would be broken in two and buried in the garden. It should never be used again. Obviously, as time went on, maybe 100 years ago, 70 years ago, the clay pipe was replaced by a tray of cigarettes which were passed around. And that tradition with our modern society has passed away now.
I should not have said that.
I'm not sure if that's the right phrase to use, but so they don't do that now. I'm sure they found something to replace it with. I don't know what it is. Maybe a cup of liquor passed around. So we get into the evening, and after the final prayers are said, then they would begin what they called wake games. These were activities to keep people awake, to watch over the body, and they might be things like playing cards, telling jokes and stories would continue. They might have competitions like trying to perform tongue twisters, the Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper type things. As you probably are aware, maybe, the more alcohol you consume, the more difficult those become. And then there would be feats of strength, acrobatics, stunts. It's like a miniature circus. I've read, and I don't believe because it lacks the respect, but I've read that sometimes the body would be taken out of the coffin and people would dance with it or sit it on their lap and use it as a puppet. So how are you? Oh, well, I'm dead. That sort of thing. I don't believe that would happen in the Irish tradition unless these people were absolutely drunk, because the respect for the dead, I'm sure, would not allow that. But I can't deny it has happened because I haven't seen every wake there has ever been. So you make your own judgment on that one. One thing that is true is they might include the corpse in some of their games. They might give it a hand of the cards, deal out poke hands to everybody and deal some to the dead person as well. The pipe that went around might be placed between the dead person's lips for them to have a pull. And certainly a glass of whiskey would probably be placed in the coffin or in the dead person's hands so that they could have a drink, a spiritual drink, a drink of the spirits, in fact. Now, as we said, there was the death money, the gifts, funeral gifts. And this was to help pay particularly for the alcohol, because a lot was drunk. And might be poteen, might be port, might be whiskey. Poteen would be a very popular choice. At the end of the wake, they would line up all of the barrels that had been drunk outside the house. So people passing by would say, wow, 10 barrels. 10 barrels of poteen. That guy was really popular. To kind of advertise how many people liked the deceased. In fact, one of the phrases they use is not just he was popular, but he killed well. Or, my lord, he killed well. And it means that they killed all those barrels. All those barrels, 10, 20, 30 barrels of poteen were emptied. They killed them all. He was a very popular man, a very popular lady. Now, it might seem shocking and appear disrespectful. These games, the drinking, the loud music, people playing the violin, playing the little squeeze box, telling the stories, that might have embarrassed this person were they still alive, but were to make people laugh, do consider the overriding theme was reverence and love for the deceased. No disrespect was meant. This is particularly true for people who died of natural causes. If the deceased was a child or a very young parent or somebody who died tragically, the wake was much more somber. But, old Jenny, who lived down the street, died at 82 in her sleep. So we're going to have a celebration of her life. That's what it was, a celebration of their life and wishing them well in their next get to heaven. In fact, there is a toast in Ireland. You may have heard this, but it's good to end on. I wish it to you as well. May you be in heaven a full half hour before the devil knows you're dead. Okay, so blessings to you. I hope this dispels some of the quirky, invented stories about Irish wakes. They were sort of solemn, but they were a celebration of the life of the person, as well as with a normal wake, watching over the person, making sure no devils or demons inhabited the body and that they were actually dead. Okay, so if you like this, please click the like button. If you want to stay up to date with our next subject and coming videos, click subscribe. Do share this with any friends who you think might find it interesting. If you're interested in studying English, check my contact details below and do come back again. So stay well, stay healthy. See you soon. Bye-bye.